behind using modern safety equipment and just got given a hernia. And I think
G'day viewers. Back when I started sword fighting, well over 20 years ago now, there were no companies that made you stuff. You could find a blacksmith who would bang you out a helmet or a sword in their shed, but for the most part you had to make your own things. As a result, I have over the years made dozens and dozens of suits of body armour for myself and for other people. Nowadays, of course, you have companies, large and small, all over the world that will make things for you, which, you know, is great. Thank you very much. It is, however, my contention that they're doing it wrong, particularly when it comes to body armour. It seems to be that they've started from a model of sport fencing and classical fencing and kind of worked backwards to beef it up for heavier swords. And I think this is really the wrong approach. So this is a fairly typical Spez thing, okay? It's got lots of padding. Problems with it are threefold in fact. First of all, obviously there are bits that are not protected, which is rather important with particularly single-handed swords. Now, yes, you can get yourself a special armoured miniskirt that goes along with it, but honestly, you know, why have two garments when you can get away with one? Second problem with it is stinking hot. There is no ventilation in this thing at all. It might be fine, even desirable in a Polish winter. In an Australian summer, it's really undesirable. These things are really, really stinking hot, and you overheat very, very quickly in them. Third problem with it is the problem with all these sort of snug-fitting material things is they don't really offer that much protection against a sealed sword. They give you padding, but it doesn't take an awful lot of force before it starts to hurt, does it? Right. Okay? And we're going to demonstrate that a little bit later. Yes. So here we've got a fairly traditional medieval style gambeson, really nicely tailored. Unlike the Spez thing, it comes all the way down to the just above the knee, so it gives you that upper thigh protection, and is for that reason much, much better. It, however, is still just padding. Okay, now normally you wear something solid underneath this, don't you, for obvious reasons. Okay, have you got them on? Yeah. Okay, I won't get with it. But as you can see, with any sort of basic padding, if it's snug padding, any sort of blow is on there, there's nothing to spread the impact of the blow. So these things don't really protect you nearly as much as you might think. So this is probably a more accurate kind of cloth armour. As you can see, unlike the really nice form-fitting gambeson, this is bulky and washy and you kind of float around in it. And so even though it's just material, that is actually a little bit better. Okay, if you want to lift up there. Because all this material actually kind of gathers up around blows and does help slow them down and provide more impact. And a lot of traditional, particularly Eastern cloth armour, was this kind of great big swimmy stuff. It's still, however, very hot. It still, however, offers not a huge amount of protection if I don't hit a swimmy bit, if I hit a solid bit, and obviously against anything like a thrust, there's not really much protection there at all. And stinking hot still?
Yeah, especially in this weather.
Yeah, so something like this is a much, much, much better option. So all this is a bit of leather under which I've riveted fairly thin steel plates. Okay, this is galvanised steel that I can cut out myself with some tin snips and bend by hand, so it doesn't have to be particularly heavy grade. Underneath that, I've added a little bit of padding, but really not very much. It's really just a bit of material there. Now, because this is solid plates, what it does is spread the blow. So if you'd like to lift your hands up. So when I hit it with the sword, rather than it just being soft, squishy stuff that doesn't really spread the impact much, this prevents that impact from landing on the body and gives you much, much better protection.
Do it again. Yeah, you
okay.
feel too much of that.
Now the remnants of actual medieval gambesony type armour that we've got are actually usually not quilted padded things. They're actually something more like this, where the material is sewn into tubes and then stuffed, pretty much like a great big cricket pad. So this is a Highland Katoon, which I made many, many years ago. And unlike the kind of soft cloth armours, this is actually pretty rigid. It's flexible, but it's also, if you like, stick your arms up, and takes a hell of a wallop, okay, even without any sort of solid plates in it. And so this is much, much better and much closer to a good form of soft, flexible armour than a sort of gambesini type thing. It is, however, very labour intensive. It took me a long time to make one of these. The other thing I'll just point out about the design is it's designed for coolness as well, for those of us who live in hot climates. Short sleeves, open armpits, as little padding there as possible just to give the full arm flexibility. And these that come down to above the knees, and also you'll notice double flapping across the important bits there. To demonstrate what I mean, I'm going to use a rock melon as a rough and ready substitute for something like a human rib cage. Okay, so this is pretty freaking tough. If I punch this with my knuckles hard enough to crack it, my knuckles might come off second best. So it's reasonably tough, not kind of pumpkin tough, but you know, if I crack this through some armour, the armour is obviously not doing the job, and I would definitely hurt a human body. The only concession I'm going to make is I am going to put it inside a plastic bag to kind of minimise the vegetable juice getting on inside my armour. So the first one I'm going to test is what I wear most of the time these days, which is just this coat of plates type thing. Okay, this is commercially made from Spain, I think. It's got no padding to speak of. It's really just got thin steel plates in there. I can bend these by hand and bend them back so they aren't stupidly thick and heavy. And I'm going to put the rock melon in this, and then I'm going to give it a good whack with a cut number 5, or mandritta tondo for the Italians, or Mittelhau for the Germans, just because it's one of my favourite fight finishing moves. So that was a pretty good blow. Right on target. And when I take my rock melon out of the bag, it is completely unharmed. There's maybe a tiny little bit of a dent there, but basically escaped entirely unscathed. Now let's repeat that with some armour that's just padding. You'll also note that the rock melon is not fixed. It can actually move after impact, just like a human body does when you're bouting. Oh dear! Look at that! Right, that could be your ribs. So the padding, with exactly the same blow, offered virtually no protection against that pretty ordinary blow with a blunt sword compared to the flat plates. And that is the point I'm trying to make. That's actually a lot nastier than I was expecting. Ouch. And just for a bit of fun, let's do it with no padding at all. Just to see if the padding made any difference whatsoever. Well, the padding made some difference. Okay? There she is, sliced neatly in half with a blunt weapon. So some padding is obviously better than none, but obviously something that spreads the impact and prevents the edge of that sword biting into the target is obviously going to be a lot better than something that is just padding. So what should we be wearing instead? Well, this is basically what I wear. So this is my coat of plates. I've got no padding on underneath it, apart from there's a tiny little material here. But those solid plates make me feel very safe and keep me safe from good solid blows. It's short sleeve. It is open armpit, so it is nice and cool. You wonder, well, what do I do about thrust of the armpits? Well, I've got this shark mesh underneath there that I use to plug up the gaps, but honestly, off-the-shelf fencing whites will do exactly the same job. Short sleeve, so I can have a separate solid elbow cop and a separate solid vambrace. You don't need padding under either of those things, and either a glove if it goes inside a basket hilt, or for longsword, a gauntlet again made of solid plate, so you're going to spread that impact and prevent me from being hit. On the same note, I vastly prefer my Terry Tyndall solid steel mask to a fencing mask with padding on it, for exactly the same reasons as I prefer that on my body. And honestly, if you're going to make a cover for a fencing mask, there's no reason you can't make something that goes over the top, side and back that's a thin steel helmet that slots in over the mask, which would be a whole lot preferable to simply soft material. The only other thing I would add is that if I was making this myself, I would make the flaps different. I would have a separate flap over this central section, so I don't need to wear separate groin protection.
So, why should it matter? Well, obviously, it would matter because I don't like hurting my friends when we're sparring. I like getting hurt, even less. But beyond that, the reason we wear armour at all is because we want to be able to, when we're bouting, deliver blows with proper speed and proper follow-through, and perhaps not full power, but inevitably fair amount of power, and not fear that we are going to seriously hurt our sparring partners. And I kind of suspect that one of the reasons you see so much tippy-tappy sort of sword tag going on, is apparently with no concept of structure or mechanics or force transmission or even force absorption. I mean, you can't, as Silver would put it, learn to ward a blow with manly strength if nobody ever throws a proper downright blow at you. And I think the reason why you see so many people dancing around and just going, "Oh, I touched you, I win," is because they're only used to finding people who aren't wearing enough armour. And so they have to rely on very light tippy-tappy hits just for plain safety, and they've never learnt to deliver proper blows because they can't do it in sparring. So if we move to something like a coat of plate, something that's designed to spread that blunt force trauma, I think it will provide better protection, but because of that, in the end, result in better fencing.